afternoon. Welcome to Grove Park in Weston-Super-Mare on this slightly windy, dismal day. I'm here with Danny from Avon Wildlife Trust in an area which we are developing as a wildflower area, wildflower meadow. This is particularly important, well actually, Danny.
So wildflowers are really important. We need them for loads of our different species. In the UK, we've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows in the last 30s. So we really need these areas to protect our wildflowers and to protect the animals that live off of them. So our insects, especially our pollinators, we need our pollinators to create food for us. Every third mouthful you eat is pollinated by a bee, and we need these areas to give them the resources when those crops aren't around. And also for us to look at these beautiful wildflowers. They're really nice, they're nice for us to see, so it's a good place for nature and people to thrive and to just enjoy nature.
With the establishing of these nature recovery networks, and as Danny's saying, giving people something to actually look at and interact with, it's shown by countless studies that people's connection with nature is essential to their mental health and essential to the structure of communities, and that's what we're all about.
So nature recovery networks are really important because they connect in all of those environments. They help that nature thrive, people thrive, and they make things better, more, bigger and joined up. So it's really important for us to do this. And there's lots of different areas around Weston and around Avon that we can improve green spaces. This area in particular, we've worked with young people, so we've worked with 14 to 24-year-olds that have helped improve this amazing space. They've built the planters, they've planted plug plants, and they've started to survey the site to see what wildlife we're bringing into the area.
And without that wildlife, without the nature recovery network, without a link up between places where the pollinators can feed themselves, then our crops won't be pollinated, and therefore the food chain breaks down. No insects, no birds, no mammals, and the whole chain, and it ends with us. And we are at this moment destroying our chain, so we need a nature recovery network.
My name's Rupert and I'm a volunteer with the Friends of Grove Park, have been for about 4 years or so. My main interests are personally conservation, ecology and wildlife in general. So about 4 years ago we started this project to dedicate this formerly disused area into a conservation and biodiversity area. So the purpose of this area is to trying to support and encourage as many different species of native animals as we possibly can. Prior to us doing anything with this area, it was basically just derelict quarry, the small tarmac path running around the pond and very little else. So we started a fundraising event with some other organisations in Weston to get a Kickstarter pocket of money to make a start. We worked with numerous different other community groups. We had dozens of different people involved. From the youngest was 4 years old. She built a little section of the bug hotel. We had adults with learning difficulties help with it, and it took us probably about 2 or 3 months for the initial stage of construction to be completed. So that was the first part of Bug City. Bug City in itself incorporates hedgehog houses in the base structure of it, and really you're using reclaimed materials to try and create as many different environments for as many different types of animal to offer them secure hiding spots, food sources, etc. It's important because when it comes to conservation, you were trying to work from the ground level up. That's the important part. So you need to look at your soil dwelling invertebrate species, then your plant species. Your plants then attract your bug species. Your bug species provide a prey source for your mammals and your birds, etc., the species that we see more readily. But all of that is maintained by the soil layer, what lives within the soil, and the plants upon it. And it's something that's often overlooked in conservation. The focus is on what we call enigmatic megafauna, which is your big flamboyant species like your elephants and your tigers and your wildcat, things like that. Things like the hedgehog goes largely ignored. Certainly in the smaller bug hotel the other side of the park, we've got evidence that one of the hedgehog houses is being used by something. I'd hope it's a hedgehog. Certainly I re-released a hedgehog a few years ago into the park. We'd like to think it's him. We can't guarantee it, because to find out whether or not it is the hedgehog, we'd have to go in there, which would probably put the hedgehog off from using the site. But we hope so. Amongst the species we're working to support are the red admiral butterfly. They lay their eggs upon the nettle, the caterpillars feed on the nettle, and then they turn into pupa upon the common nettle. Most of us regard the common nettle as being a nuisance if it grows in our garden, because it will sting you as a defense strategy that's developed over millions of years. But without that one species that we consider to be a weed, the red admiral butterfly would go extinct. It has to have that species. In the future, we would like to focus on the brimstone butterfly, which is the large yellow species of butterfly that you sometimes see. That species requires buckthorn to breed upon and again lay its eggs. And so if anybody watching this has access to buckthorn, we would dearly love, ideally, a donation of a couple of nice buckthorns that we can plant out to hopefully work on increasing that species too. The other part of maintaining this area, once a conservation area is established, you do as little maintenance as possible, because once you get involved with it too much as a person, you scare off the wildlife you're trying to protect. But we've had problems with blanket weed this year because it's been very hot, and we had an issue with the balance of the pond ecosystem being destabilized by excess removal of vegetation. That removal of the vegetation at the wrong time of year, which is what happened, takes away all the eggs and the larvae of your pond species such as your damselflies and your dragonflies, etc. And so that opens up access for simple plants like blanket weed to just bloom, is what they call it, an algal bloom. The trouble with an algal bloom is that smothers out all the light from the plant species that you really want, and then they die off, and then they decompose, and that sucks out the oxygen from the water and increases the CO2, which acidifies the pond, And so what you see is a cascade effect where you collapse the ecosystem, restrict the growth of the blanket weed to allow the plant species to thrive, that will then allow the damselfly to breed upon, and it will restore the ecosystem back to what it was prior to a little bit of accidental interference. And again, because the pond systems are interconnected, if this one collapses, it will have a knock-on effect to the next one and the bottom one. So it's work that has to be done because, frankly, as a conservation group and all the volunteers that have helped develop this conservation area over the years, we don't want that to happen after all the hard work we've put in. So a little bit of time-consuming work now can make a massive difference next year and the year after, when hopefully we see all our wildlife come back as it was last year. Year on year, it will improve and it will increase the biodiversity, and that will go on indefinitely. So now we've built the infrastructure. There are a few other bits and pieces I'd like to put in. For example, we'd like to put in a wildlife meadow towards the back where we've got a separate raised bed laid out. And again, once that's all in place, there's very little you really need to do. It takes a few years to establish itself, and once it's established itself, it becomes fairly self-regulatory. To kickstart the project, I can't remember the exact figure, but we worked in conjunction with a group called Osprey Outdoors, and between us all, we earned a reasonable packet of money to buy, for example, the shelter and the signage, the artwork, etc., to inform the public, try and connect them or reconnect people with nature as well, because that's what's sadly missing, is that people are so disconnected from the natural world that we ignore it largely. The sheer beauty of it, the enormous diversity and complexity of it is just ignored by the average person, which is kind of where, and I think most of the Friends of Grove Park volunteers would agree with me on this, is where we've kind of gone wrong. We've kind of lost our way a little bit, and we've overlaid a human world on top of a natural world, whereas the two are intermeshed and inherently linked. So if everyone who learns something from just spending some time here or sees something they haven't seen, it draws them that little bit closer to making that vital reconnection with the natural world, because it's of critical importance to us, as well as all the myriad of creatures that we see using it.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you happier with a script or without a script? Without one, you can just pretty much throw in whatever you want. Yeah. Yeah, we're down tomorrow again. Yeah. Yeah, see, we're done here. I just left it to her just to do it off the top of her head.